And there's a genuine uplifting feeling that you get when you manage to automate the boring bits like data extraction and take this off your to-do list forever.
This is the B2B Performance Marketing Podcast by Webmarketer, here to help you make the right moves with your B2B advertising. No spin, no smoke and mirrors, just honest insights from the advertising front line. Welcome back. Today, we're going to dive a bit deeper into something we alluded to in episode 20, and that's the idea of data enablement. There's a phrase that we use a lot with new clients, which is that we're the ads experts, they're the domain experts, and the best solution is where we both meet somewhere in the middle. Because ads data almost always needs a commercial context overlaid. For example, if you were running a ski clothing business, you could never realistically expect your best month to be in the height of summer. Now, that's a pretty obvious example, but you get what I'm saying. Every business in every market has got loads of nuances, and they need to be considered when you're working on the strategy and also when you're interpreting data. Now, there are examples where data doesn't need much commercial context, but this is usually at the micro level where you're comparing different elements, like audience targeting, different creative, like image and video, and ad copy. When you zoom out and look at the data overall over a longer time period, like monthly or quarterly, if you notice an unexpected change, it can almost always be explained by a shift in the business or in the wider market. And actually, to get that zoomed out cross-channel performance overview, that's pretty hard to do unless you're using some sort of reporting software.
I remember in the early days of Webmarketer, we used to extract data manually into Google Sheets, and this took a lot of time, up to an hour per client every single week, because we were sending weekly reports. And this data gathering wasn't exactly time well spent.
Yeah, it was a bit of a catch-22, because until we'd gathered the data for the reports, we didn't have that top-level view of how ads were performing as a whole across channels. And as I mentioned a minute ago, having that overview is critical for making good optimization decisions. So we knew we needed access to it at least weekly. But we also knew that we really needed to speed the process up. So we started using Supermetrics and getting the data into Looker Studio, or Data Studio as it was called back then, but doing it automatically. And that worked really well for quite a while until we had a bit of a rude awakening. Because at the time, when you blended data together in Looker Studio from different channels, you needed something called a join key. Now, a join key is basically a field, a piece of data that exists in the dataset of every channel and is the same across each one, so that it can be used as a reference point. Naturally, the date was the best choice here. So we called all of the channel datasets in, we blended it by date, and that worked really well until a client paused one of their channels for a week. Now, while this might not sound like a big deal, because there was no data for the time where that channel was paused, the join key failed, and so nothing came through for the other channels during that time either. And so the whole report broke and sent me spiraling into a bit of a panic mode.
I also remember that the blending in Looker Studio was already really tricky, so that meant that it needed constant attention and fixing. And this date issue cropping up meant that this was really the last straw for us, and this wasn't a solution that worked for us anymore.
That feeling when a solution becomes a whole new problem is just horrible, but I knew that I had to act quickly to fix it. I figured that if we couldn't rely on Looker Studio to blend the data for us, then we'd have to figure out a way to do it ourselves, especially because any solution inside Looker Studio would be really complex and would also have a high margin for error. So I took out a trial for Supermetrics for Google Sheets. I built an individual spreadsheet for each channel for each client. And then I also created a master spreadsheet where we called in the channels separately and blended them ourselves using dynamic formulas. I also created a space where we could add the month start date, the month end date, and budgets and targets too.
Just as a side note here, at the time, to create this, Louis had to block out, I think it was 2 full weeks to get this sorted. And I can see why, because even now, looking at some of the formulas, they look like pure wizardry. And this was at a time that was pre-LLMs, so he really had to work hard to figure each formula out for himself.
But the important thing is that after we did this, we've never looked back. We've now got SOPs so that the team can set this up for new clients, and we've actually got more useful data than we had before too. So now we can instantly see things like percentage of the month elapsed, percentage of spend versus budget, and progression to target as a percentage, all broken out by channel and as an overall picture, and all included in our weekly pulse reports too. Going through this process, which was a bit of a roller coaster, ended up saving us more than 40 hours per month, which was redirected into doing more valuable work for clients. I'm well aware that data extraction hasn't just been a massive time bandit for us, it's something that loads of marketers struggle with. Just last week, I had a power hour with someone who had the exact same problem. They were spending an hour a week collating data for their reports. And while I had to work at lightning speed, within the hour, we had a Looker Studio dashboard built with all of the same data points so that they could just copy and paste it rather than having to go and get the data themselves. So my hour was able to save them more than 4 hours per month. And that's the kind of transformation I love to see. And it's one that we should all be aiming for.
So to round this episode off, we see that data is a huge enabler when it comes to performance. But having that really useful data shouldn't take you a million years to extract it and blend it together. The value is in what you do with the data, so we should all be dialing down the amount of time it takes to get it and dialing up the amount of time that it takes to interpret and act on it. And there's a genuine uplifting feeling that you get when you manage to automate the boring bits like data extraction and take this off your to-do list forever. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a follow and a review. It really helps us out. If you've got a current focus that you're working on and you'd like us to cover, head to webmarketeruk.com/topic and put it forward for a future episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.